right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Morning Cup. Today I'm joined with one of my really good friends and my coach, Cooper Napoli.
Yes, ma'am. Hello. What's up, everybody?
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm stoked, dude. I know we've been working together for a year and a half almost now.
I
And so
know.
I'm so stoked to kind of, talk to you on this level. It'll be great.
Yeah, I feel like Cooper and I have like we were having weekly calls and then we get
hmm
busy sometimes, but
hmm
we'll chat for like an hour plus on just
Yeah.
like educational shit or just shooting the shit. But I don't know. It's really nice to have a coach that you can have like this type of conversation, like these conversations with, and just like constant communication with.
Yeah.
Um, so I honestly would I call you a mentor too.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I feel like, I mean, if we really look at like the word coaching, I think a lot of coaches end up just being program deliverers and they're not really coaching, right? Or like trying to pull something like out of the athlete or the person that they work with that, puts them in a little bit of a zone of discomfort and kind of pushes them. So yeah, I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, I like so for me, it's really great as a coach to have a coach, and I talk about this a lot.
hmm
But it's also not so like it's the training part I've learned a lot about, and just like how you've opened my eyes to different methodologies in training. So
hmm
I've been with Exos for almost 4 years, and so that's how my programming had been for a very long time. And so it's cool to be exposed to different ideas such as like West Side and
hmm
like triphasic, and that's because that's what we do with my training.
hmm
um, and it's been fun to experiment and again just see that there's different methods out there that also work you know
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, my background kind of comes from, I mean, so I didn't go to college. I have no actual formal education on training. This was all kind of just personally led learning, and just a really strong desire to deliver results, right? Kind of above all else. And as someone so I worked for Equinox, right? As I know we've talked about in the past, which is somewhat like a similar model to Exos, where they're going to bring you people to train, and they kind of operate at X level, and we want to make sure that like we're providing the best results possible to general populations. But there's a lot of weird stuff that can kind of go on with working in like a big box gym, that I found personally, like um just like kind of the culture around like how we operate with a certain kind of clientele that sort of expects like you to more often than not kind of placate what makes them comfortable and like sort of adhere to that a lot more. And so like for me, I always felt like I wanted to be like a strength and conditioning coach, not necessarily like a personal trainer or like someone who was kind of just a glorified paid for babysitter. And at times I would feel like that often, in the practice, and but I knew like kind of deeper in my head that like learning wise I really needed to like go figure out a way to work with people like yourself, who are more open minded, who are kind of ready to train at a level that is um like just different, in terms of what like the goals and the difficulty of the goals are. So yeah, um it's been a fun journey to get here.
so for those of you who don't know Cooper, he's also Delta 5 Performance on Instagram,
hmm
and I'll shout that out again at the end. I honestly don't know how we started following each other on Instagram, but everyone I know in the fitness world is like through Instagram.
Yep.
And so luckily I got connected with you somehow and we started talking about PRI stuff, I think, because we were
hmm
dealing with some shoulder blade stuff. I think that was the
Yeah.
first time we like talked.
Yep. Yeah. I think
Um,
we similarly tweaked our shoulder blades. And then I think if I remember correctly, you had posted something that I was like, oh, well, let me give that a try. And then I was like, oh, that solved it. And I was like, hey, that was a good idea. Thank you for posting that.
The one time, like the one exercise actually fixes the problem. So do you use West Side and or triphasic with majority of the people you work with, or
Mhm.
does it look a little different?
No, yeah, so I would say yes, because the kind of athlete I work with is somewhere on the spectrum of typically intermediate to advanced and even elite levels of training. And I found that, as long as you've trained before, like we've sort of met, like you probably have like a certain amount of like just basic proficiency that requires us to now increase the complexity of the training to address different demands, different needs, and kind of take the training wheels off, so to speak. And so, yeah, I tend to use the skeleton of those things pretty frequently, but it changes a ton from athlete to athlete in terms of what their goal actually ends up being. So for, to use you as an example, right, training for triathlon, so swim, bike, run, looks a lot different than say training a tactical athlete who's preparing for a selection course. I get them through ranger school, SFAS, which is Special Forces Assessment and Selection, AIC, which is like the Advanced Infantry course, and then yeah, lots of different selections for things around like Special Missions Unit and things of that nature. So yeah, I've worked with a lot of guys in the military and women too, and it's been fantastic. That's like definitely been a fun population to work with on my end.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just total opposite than when you were at Equinox.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's so. Yeah, a little bit more about my background there. Is I started training at Equinox in, I believe it would have been 2016. So fall of 2016, and I had done a lot of training myself up to that point, and so it was like wonderful to get my start, kind of working with people who are kind of coming in off the street and, just wanting to work through basic goals, and, figuring out how to kind of nail that. First and foremost is just help a person, become, you know, the stronger than they were, or, lose more body fat, or, any of the number of things that kind of, come through as general population, is a really, really good place to start. But, kind of some of the downsides of working in like a big box gym is you somewhat feel like you have to pander to the clientele a little bit more, because there is like a huge customer service component that's like laid out in a standard operating procedure for you to follow. And
Hmm.
I didn't find that necessarily meant I couldn't be a good coach, but I did find that it was, like eventually an environment that was just a little too restrictive, in terms of developing, the kind of person I wanted to help develop, and developing my own coaching practice, and really, you know, kind of taking some chains off, and setting free what I knew was kind of the best way to train, as opposed to what maybe needs to happen in a corporate, gym environment. So yeah, much different clientele I work with now than what I was working with there. And it's, I think, for the better, and in terms of
Yeah.
my practice and who I get to work with on a day-to-day basis, for sure.
So, I know you've mentioned before to me that you didn't go to college for
Hmm.
this.
Yep.
So I think one that is incredible because you're showing people, because I think nowadays, and I know myself, maybe it's just myself, but I feel like for a long time, I had to keep going back to school. I'm like, man, I don't have a master's degree.
Hmm.
What am I doing? Like, if I'm not going to be successful. And here you are, and you didn't go to, like, you didn't follow that structural norm, and you are super successful. You're working with the population that you want, like an elite athlete population,
Hmm.
and you didn't need to go to college to do that. And I think
Yeah.
that's incredible. So, like, how
Thank
did
you.
you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know that like I am a risk taker, kind of inherently, and prefer to kind of operate in that kind of stress, where I do have things on the line, and like, things may not necessarily go well, and I, maybe don't even have necessarily like a perfectly laid out like fallback plan. Because I think it kind of puts me in an environment and a headspace where, one, I know that I have to get good at the thing, in order for it to be successful. So I have to truly like and quickly become like a master of my craft, in whatever, I kind of choose to do there. And then I also have to, really figure out and address the pain points and the needs. And I think like what I realized was, so I grew up in a military family, and was in the military myself for a little bit. And I had so much structure in my life growing up.
Mm.
And what I realized by the time, so I went to an all boys boarding school on the East Coast called Avon Old Farms. Great, great school. And I sort of felt like when I reached the end of that, that I had gained a skill set, that I didn't necessarily need to go to college to continue to further develop. And I kind of found myself like just miserable by the whole process. So I did go. I went to West Point for like half a year, hated it. That's the United States Military Academy. So like that combination of school and like the military environment, which I had practically lived in at home for, 20 years to that point, was kind of like, I'm kind of just like, I kind of just don't need this anymore. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like, like it was just burning me out and reinforcing things I already knew. And I just, not that I thought it was beneath me, certainly not, but I just sort of felt like there was other things in life I wanted to explore, and other places I wanted to go, and other things I wanted to see that, West Point just wasn't going to provide me. And so I went back home to Chicago and, um, enrolled in DePaul, which is just a school, in Chicago, and was taking classes and was kind of like, "Yeah, I know I can do well academically. I'd done academically
Mm-hmm.
well kind of my whole life to that point, and just felt like there was nothing that I could learn anymore in a classroom, because I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. Like I don't have to go through those official channels. There was nothing really that I felt like I was going to learn, that I couldn't teach myself.
Right.
And what I realized was that like I was passionate about things and I did really, really want to learn X, Y, and Z. And that like everything else academically felt like it was just going to get in the way. And I knew I wanted to be a really, really, really freaking good strength coach. And so I just went to a library and sat in front of books and, committed to a year of like, I'm not going to read or listen to anything, that is not training related, or nutrition related. And so, yeah, I kind of put myself through my own like degree, so to speak, and just really stayed on top of my education and tried to learn as much as I possibly could for a year, and did really well doing that. It was actually something I got from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I think he meditated every day for a year, and was like, I'm just going to commit to doing that. And I don't think he regularly meditates at all anymore after that year because he's like, I got what I needed to out of it
Yeah.
by just like committing to what is a relatively like short period of time, but like intense, right? Like
Yeah.
like maximum intensity for like a certain period of time. And I'm like, you can teach yourself anything, I feel like. And with YouTube and libraries and, podcasts and like all these wonderful things that are out there, I felt like all I really needed to do was just, put a little legwork into finding who the best in the business were, figure out a way to get in the room with those people and learn. Um, and that's what I did.
Absolutely.
And yeah, the thought of college made me hypoxic, you know, um, after a certain point in my life. And so, yeah, I feel very fortunate, though, to have like, had the opportunities that I did have, on the college front, but it just wasn't for me, dude. Not for me at all.
I can just really appreciate that, especially because I've talked about this before, but I honestly don't remember a lot of the things I learned in college.
Hmm.
It was just kind of to check the boxes and to get the foundational, and I understand why we had to do what we did, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of merit to like you kind of said, super saturating. It sounds
Hmm.
like a long time, a year, but
Hmm.
relatively it is pretty short time.
Hmm.
And I've had experience of like spending a month with no Instagram, for example, like no distractions,
Hmm.
and learning a concept, and the retention that you have like is so different than
Hmm.
when you allow these distractions,
Yeah.
in your life. So I can say I 100% agree. And I think that's great advice for anybody listening who, feels bad about not getting a master's or having a PhD. While
Hmm.
those are really awesome things to have, you don't have to have them to be successful.
Yeah, and to your point, I'd heard so many people tell me, and like on forums online, that like no amount of college prepared them for X, Y, or Z job, strength coach included. It was sort of like there were so many intangible things that they just did not have um, with that. And, I feel like that was where I really, just decided, I was like, there's way too many people, that were candidly speaking kind of pseudonymously online about like, their experiences and like lack of, faith in what they had learned across, multiple different degrees and such. And that just kind of made me realize that like, there wasn't really a job that I wanted that was in line with, that. And so, yeah, I mean, to that point too, like I also think it's like a crazy risk to take to not go to school.
Yeah.
Just because like, there's a lot of things that does provide. There's been times like well into, running my business where I was like, I'm screwed because I didn't go to college. Right. And like, like, because I don't have like that fallback plan, but that was also sort of like the thing that like really motivated me to like double down on myself and like keep going. Um, is because I didn't really have a fallback, and I knew that like if I had to take another gen ed a day of my life, I was going to lose my mind. Which like to that point is like you have all these classes kind of laid out in front of you, and with that structure and like with a lot of traditional education, where I feel like when you're trying to learn like so many different things at once, you can only really go so deep on that.
Hmm.
And that was where I really found like a lot of solace in my in leading my own learning and kind of laying out almost like a curriculum for myself was like I can go really really deep on like these handful of things and understand them intimately with like you said with like no distractions. I don't have to go like switch gears into like writing an English paper about like poetry because that's my gen ed class today when I know I want to be a strength coach and I want to be good at it. I don't have to kind of worry about something kind of superfluous to the content I really want to learn.
Ooh, dropping the big words.
I'm trying.
I love it.
Pulling out of my lexicon today.
I'm just like, did you like study the dictionary before you got on this call? Because damn.
No, I just like writing a lot. So I try to teach
That's
myself as many new words as possible through that practice.
you you're a beautiful writer too. We've talked about this
Thank you.
before, but y'all, if you're listening and you don't follow him on Instagram, I hope I get you a lot of followers from this
I hope so.
speaker.
That'd be great. I would really appreciate that. Anyone listening, it would be a great honor to have you read my handwriting.
Well, it's just great because I know we've talked about this before, but I really like how your posts are like journals. Like you talked like they're
Hmm.
journal entries. And I
Hmm.
think that's such a great way to keep track of what you're doing and,
Thank you.
it's a log, it's a training log essentially.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
your captions are so well thought out, and
Appreciate
and
that.
in that in itself is a great practice, of writing.
Yeah.
Um
Well, yeah, and that's, like another thing too is like the creativity that I feel like leading your own learning provides you. Again, kind of like frees you from the idea of like, well, what is X person telling me I need to do versus like what feels good and what actually helps me like learn the stuff. I've written hundreds of thousands of words on training at this point, just on Instagram alone, probably.
mhm.
And then, kind of writing something out and then going and verbalizing it. There's a really good book called How We Learn, When and Why It Happens. I forget the author off the top of my head, but that was a book I that was like one of the first books I read when I was starting all this. And it was really important for me, to kind of grasp like, okay, well, what does learning actually look like? And like, kind of like the title says, like, when and why does it happen better or worse, for some people? And so for me, that book really stood out to me from a perspective of like, speak it, read it, write it, visualize it, like as many sensory things as you can get and as many like tactile experiences you can have with the
Mm,
thing you're trying to learn about, the better it's going to be because your brain's just going to rewire all those different pathways in a very rich and meaningful way. And so I sort of viewed Instagram as like one I need to figure out a way to let the world know that I really want to help them and feel like I'm good enough to help them in these ways. And it was also kind of a way for me to creatively express like, hey, these are the things I'm doing in training, and like these are kind of the underlying reasons why I'm choosing those things. And just kind of throwing it out into the world and seeing what people thought. And having having that practice in place of writing and reading and, watching stuff and then going into the gym and actually doing it, and cueing myself through it or cueing my athletes through it. It's kind of like you can't fail at that point to learn.
yeah.
You kind of, and I'm big on like, the reason I named my company Delta 5 Performance is because Delta representing change and 5 representing the, 5 major systems of the body, those being cardiopulmonary and endocrine, nervous, digestive, and musculoskeletal. Right. And I'm like, if we can nail those 5 systems and build an environment and create change in your environment to have all those systems fire in the way that they need to towards the thing that you're saying you want to get good at, you really can't fuck it up. It actually becomes like almost impossible for you to. And so that to me was like, a really big learning piece is just like, look, if we can create the environment that allows X to maximally occur, doesn't matter what we're trying to get good at. I'm not even talking training anymore. It's just anything in life you want to get good at. Like if you create the environment for it and you get those 5 systems working in a way that they have to kind of constantly get stressed out and amplify and work in a new direction, it becomes really hard to suck at something and you can get good at anything really quickly. When I'm creating the environment to learn, and this is true for anything, not just training, this is true for anything you want to get good at in life, is like all you really have to do is like set up an environment where change delta, right, can happen for those 5 systems, that it's going in the direction that you want to go and like having as many rich experiences with the thing as you possibly can. It's like learning a language, right, where you like immerse yourself in that in that thing, and it's really hard for you to get worse at it. You kind of can't fuck it up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple. You can't fuck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really like though how you mentioned how your name, like your business
Mm-hmm.
came to fruition. Was that easy for you? I feel like naming a business is kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, I
Yeah,
guess.
no, totally.
But how did that come to you? Like, was that like a series of planning sessions, or did you kind of have like this epiphany of like, hey, this is my brand?
So I remember there was like some company that like, you sort of put in all these words and like you pay like, $100 or something, and like they'll give you like X amount of names, that are kind of built around that. And so I was like, you know, let me research kind of like what I want to represent, and kind of just plug it into the system. And so the system did not spit out Delta 5 Performance, right? That was not at all what it did. But I kind of was like looking at some of the names, and I don't remember any of them off the top of my head. It's been years, but one of those like stuck out to me in particular, and I was like, well, what if like I think it's a good idea, like, because training is kind of like a weird science in that it's inexact, and I find it to be very artistic, actually, like in terms of the application, because there's so much subjective that goes
Mm-hmm.
on with it. And I was like, so I probably need to lean into a name that is kind of somewhat metaphoric in a way, but also like scientific in a way. And so that
Right.
was where I kind of landed on eventually, like, well, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to change people's lives, right, through strength and conditioning, which is really just influencing the, five major systems of the body. And so I was like, Delta 5 performance is exactly what it is.
I love that.
And yeah, when I kind of came to that conclusion, I was like, it can't really be named anything else.
Right.
I was like, it's this for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I tend to be a big believer, like with creative work, like do a bunch of brainstorming and kind of like work until you feel like you either reach a block or are just tired or don't really want to work on that thing anymore, and then like just leave it and then
Yeah.
come back to it when you feel like you have like a fresh idea. And so that whole process probably took me a good month,
I like how
but I
you
got there.
said, I like how you said, like, you've kind of been making the analogy of training and art because
Hmm.
it really is that. Like, you can't
Hmm.
design a good training program when
Hmm.
you're fried or like when you're not
Yeah.
clear-minded or when you've been programming for like maybe an hour and you just reach a
Hmm.
threshold. It's
Hmm.
just like art too. Like, you get in, like, sometimes you feel like you got the juices going, but you can't force a good program. And it also, you can't rush a good program too.
Yeah. Hmm. Absolutely. No, and the cool thing about art, I went to Amsterdam a few weeks ago for a week, and went to a lot of art museums while I was there. Is like, there's kind of like clearly, like, so I was at the Van Gogh Museum. I was like, clearly there's like a consistent theme of like, these faces that Van Gogh was drawing, like they occupy like kind of the middle to top third of the painting, right? When he
Mm-hmm.
was just doing his self-portraits or whatever. So like perspective and like where you put things on the canvas, like that's a science to an extent, right? And like, sure, you can do it different ways and get more abstract with it. Abstract art is awesome, and abstract training is really awesome too. But like there's certain stuff where it's like, hey, if you're gonna draw someone, it probably doesn't make sense to just draw their like middle of their eyes like to the top of their forehead and put that like on the left corner of the page. Like you're not really drawing a person at that point, right? Like, so there
Mm.
is like, sort of a science to like what is pleasing on the eye, what makes sense to like, like logistically, like how do we lay this out? Like what are the focal points? Like what are like the things we need to really like magnify? What's the color theory of this thing? Um, and yeah, I mean, I get a lot of inspiration from art when it comes to training because I think it kind of shows you that like the skeleton is the skeleton. Like the focal point probably needs to be here,
Right.
but what we do to doctor that up and what colors we put where is entirely up to you at that point, and that is then what paints the picture or tells the story of this person's training. And kind of like another concept I like to use is really is that storytelling component of like the person who I'm working with. And I think that like art, storytelling, training, it's all the same stuff, just different mediums and different applications. And it's really good to go search from things that are completely different from training to inform you about how to make better training decisions.
Damn. Mic
So
drop.
I try.
That I think that has to be my favorite analogy of all times about,
Great.
how there is a focal point with like a picture, or like,
Hmm.
a painting, and there also is with training on like what's the main point? What's the
Hmm.
theme? It's not a
Hmm.
bunch of random chaos.
Yeah.
That's not very pleasing to the
No.
body.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting that. Yeah. Yeah, no, that creates a nuclear bomb in your knee.
Right,
When
somewhere,
we do that. Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious.
But yeah, I
That's so
just love
funny.
how we could tie this into your trip to Amsterdam. It looked beautiful, by the way.
It was sweet. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty epic. Yeah, we stayed in a place that had like a sauna and like a super nice jacuzzi tub inside it. So it was like, go walk around the city all day, like put your 30,000 steps in,
Yeah,
and
seriously.
then come back and like just completely chill and relax, almost like you're at a spa, but like you're the only people in there. And so it was really, really nice. Probably the best trip I've ever taken, actually, which is sweet.
I like
Another,
to, yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I would like to appreciate and recognize that you like good for you for taking that time for yourself.
Hmm.
Like especially being a business owner,
Hmm.
it's you're probably working all the time, and I think we are in that hustle culture. And I've talked about hustle culture before, but it's important to just totally disconnect, not create. And we were just talking about creating and like the art
Hmm.
of it, but there's also an art to not creating and kind of
Yeah.
just existing, and just like
Yeah.
you and I have talked about before of, why one of the reasons why you started your business was so you could take a
Hmm.
mental health day when needed. And I think
Yeah.
that should be like the goal for everyone. We should not work, live to work or
No.
like was it work to live? I don't know what it is, but we shouldn't
Yeah.
center our life around work is what
No,
it
I
comes down to.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And now like when I'm quote unquote like Coach Cooper, right? I love to I'm like fully present being a coach and pulling from all those things, but I feel like over the years, and the way I've structured my business is like the second I don't have to be, I can seamlessly transition into Cooper the person. Not that these are two different like split personalities that I'm like,
Yeah.
having a Joker moment with in my brain. It's just like, being able to transition, kind of from periods of like intense, really like high energy, high focus work to like being like, I'm chilling out, I'm relaxing is a really, really important, skill I think to have. And yeah, I mean, I struggled with mental health issues a lot growing up and into my early 20s. And still from time to time go through bouts of things. But I really kind of realized that like if that wasn't something I could solve or get on top of or learn to live with, um, I wasn't really going to provide a lot, of value to myself or the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, learning to address that and like taking concepts from, Tim Ferriss wrote a book called The 4 Hour Work Week. And
Yeah.
so I'd love to work 4 hours in a week, but like that's just unrealistic. I feel like,
Correct. Yeah.
but like nevertheless, like concepts in that book like talked about lifestyle design. And it was like, what does your lifestyle need to look like for you to actually like be the best version of yourself? And much like my decision not to go to college, like I don't really have a traditionally functioning brain, right? Like I have mental health issues. I've been through traumatic things in my life. Like I need to like have room and space to recover. And like, when I feel like I've pushed a little too hard, I need to have agency over like shutting it down and moving in a completely different direction. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of the most beautiful thing about, what I've set up for myself, like between me and myself, is like I can respect my boundaries, a lot easier in this environment, of being an entrepreneur. And um, yeah, it's like it's an excellent way for me to live. Um,
I I'd like to appreciate and recognize also about you like opening up about that stuff.
yeah.
And I think also at being like a man, there's
Hmm.
like a stigmatism about talking about mental health issues. And so
Yeah.
just want to applaud you for bringing that up, but also recognizing that you have these things that
Hmm.
happen, and understanding that nothing's wrong with you. You just need to respect your boundaries
Hmm.
and be a human and
Yeah.
kind of be in that moment when it's needed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, what's interesting about a lot of like those kind of like traditionally masculine concepts of like, oh, you have to like work super hard and like provide and like do all these things is like I feel like sure, even if that's in like a DNA wiring, to kind of go about it, like I think the application of what that actually ends up looking like is like super flawed. And
Mm-hmm.
having been in, again, growing up in a military family, like, being in the military myself for a little while because I was in the Marine Corps too after I left West Point. Um, like, yeah, that's like a way of kind of going about it. It's also like what are you really fighting for? Are you fighting for just more money for your family or yourself? Like are you just fighting for like more material stuff? Like what are you actually like trying to defend here?
Right.
And I think like if you really like sit down and slow down and self-examine your role in relationship or in a like environment, um, you kind of got to realize that like if you let yourself get walked all over, like you're actually not defending shit at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually defending someone else's right to walk all over you, right? So you
Damn.
kind of you have to fight for your own ability to like protect your boundaries. And so like I view that more so as the thing that's like that's what I need to defend. That's what I need to fight for because that's what makes me the best version of myself and like makes me way better of a person to the people that I care about. And that's kind of like that's the hill to die on.
Yeah,
Is like defending your boundaries so that you can consistently step up as the best version of yourself, or at least most of the time be that.
absolutely.
Because when you're getting walked all over, it doesn't feel good, right?
No,
Like
you
and it's like what are you doing at that point? Like it's because it's certainly not living, at least from my
absolutely.
perspective. So,
Absolutely. I think that's important for everyone to hear too, of just
hmm
prioritizing your boundaries. I know for me, I feel like I can get caught up in the grind and
hmm
then it's like a cascade of negative events of like negative self-talk because I'm
hmm
tired, I'm never doing enough, and it's just like this
yeah,
vicious cycle. So you have to get yourself out of like that
hmm
that negative tumbleweed, if you will.
yeah,
Um, and so
yeah,
I can appreciate that, but I kind of want to connect this too. So, you're Coach Cooper
hmm
for different populations, and
yeah,
more recently, you started working with high schoolers.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. hmm
let's chat about that because
My
that's
young
different
studs.
than your
Yep.
Gen Pop. That's different than you know um, your tactical athletes. So
Yeah.
what are the high school dudes like?
So it's super funny because I also started working recently with a youth girls lacrosse team,
Oh yes.
as well as a high school boys football team and lacrosse team. So I kind of work with like a lot of different cultures, and a lot of different styles of training with that. And it's really easy in some ways because they're young and impressionable.
Mm-hmm.
They'll kind of like you know listen to you a little bit easier than some adults who like have all this ego in the way and like want to like push against things you say and love to find room for more excuses. But
Yeah.
I'm like these kids have way more busy schedules than anyone I've ever worked with, and they're like twice as open-minded and twice as adherent to the training as like a lot of adults that I've worked with. Like,
Yeah.
and so they like, they kill it. And I really love working with them because it's inspiring to me to see such busy individuals like sort of end their day and like ask like, but what more could I be doing? And like I think that also kind of plays into like, look, like you got to also respect and like encourage them to like slow down and
Mm.
relax, all the same, as you would with anyone else. Even though they seem to have like an unlimited well of energy, they need to learn like when to sit on their butts and chill out and like relax and just focus on anything other than their sport and their training.
Yeah.
And so my big thing with like these young populations is like, look, the training is the training, and like there's a lot we can pull out from our minds relative to that, to make us good at anything we want to do in life. But really it's like more like commitment to a lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like hey, like, with these young people, especially, like, you guys want to play football at a really high level, or, lacrosse at a really high level, but like also like what do you want out of your life? Like, and
Right.
how do you sort of feel like you're going to have to go about anything, like, to go back to that, education piece, is like, how do you want to get good at anything you want to get good at in your life? Because no matter what you choose, pain is going to be a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Don't care what you choose to do. That's a guarantee. But getting them to kind of conceptualize that, like, suffering is largely going to come from your own mind,
Yeah.
and how intense that pain gets is probably mostly going to come from up here. And so getting them to kind of wrap their minds around, like, the mindset and the kindness they have to kind of lead, from within themselves, as well as, just like, hey, like, what are your principles, like, what does honor mean to you, and things of that nature, like, really become like a focal point of the training. And the mechanism through which we learn that is like, let's go do something really fucking hard today in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, I'm gonna throw some brand new variation, at you, which is kind of aligned with, like, a West Side Barbell approach to things, where it's like, I'm gonna constantly change the stimulus on you, and I'm gonna throw different variations at you, and you're gonna have to figure it out. Like,
Right.
and I'm here to teach you, but you're the one who's gonna have to go in there, do the new thing, and figure it out, and become a better athlete and just a better person in general, from figuring out and realizing that, like, you can be shown something brand new today and just fucking crush it, because you're just good. You're good at what you want to be good at.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that. Like just
so yeah.
teaching them, like exposing them to new variables and like
Hmm.
giving them that experience, and then they kind of have to like it's up to them to figure out their strategy.
Hmm.
So I like that.
Yeah.
How often would you say off the top of your head are you
Hmm.
changing the variables on them?
Hmm.
And is that just dependent on the time of the season,
Yeah.
what they're in?
Yeah. So I change the variables, pretty much every week on.
Okay.
And really what I'm trying to do with that is like I don't program any more than a week or two out. That's like
Mm-hmm.
kind of the maximum I'm gonna do. And like, so when I was at Equinox, it was like, you need to program 6 weeks out, for all your people at all times. They should be able to look into the crystal ball and decide that this is what they're doing and this is how it's gonna be done. And I always thought that was bullshit. And frankly it is. Like, because you don't know, like, what if this person has a terrible week
Mm,
and they're super stressed, and like work went horrible, and they like lost, like, 3 nights of sleep in a row, or they, were up super stressed, or like couldn't fall asleep, and like, is that plan really the plan still? Because
right.
that's a great way to fucking ruin someone's progress.
Right.
And so with the big groups that I work with of those high school kids, and this is where it differs between individual training, is really that, like, those high school kids, I kind of have to look at the group and be like, where are you all at right now? Because some of you are stressed for sure. You got things going on at home, whatever. Some of you are like, somewhere in the middle, and some of you are like, I'm good, I can tolerate more right now. And so
Mm,
kind of, understanding that, like, they have lives, and I'm gonna need to kind of change, the program based around what they're doing. And like, if I know it's fucking finals week, right? Like, do we really need to be going and like max effort deadlifting today?
right.
And doing that, or should we maybe try and, like, figure out a way to, like, hey, let's go down to the fields, let's get out in the sun, let's do some like really high intensity sprints in a fun competitive environment, and then let's go up to the gym and, like, hit some muscle groups, in a environment post, like, getting a bunch of like runners high into you guys. Because and that's kind of how I end up programming for everyone, is like, it's got to be custom, and it's got to flow with the seasons of your life. And if it doesn't, I don't think it's coaching. I think it's program delivery,
Yeah.
right?
Damn.
And I don't deliver programs. I coach, and that's what I want to do. Is like, I want to make programs that are like flowing with you up, down, whatever it is. And like, with your stuff too, this is like, like when you've tweaked something, or when, like, you've had like a ton of sessions you've had to do in a week, and like travel, it's like we got to figure out like the intensity and volume trade-off that we're really looking at here. Because if it's just doing what the book says and going by like, like what it says you should do perfectly on these volumes, like what are we doing here?
Right.
Because you can't tolerate that volume right now because you're super fucking stressed. Right? And it's like, why are we gonna layer another like all in thing on top of you here? It just doesn't make sense.
I love that you're teaching this at such a young age too, because
Hmm.
and especially in high school, they don't really have access to strength coaches all the
Mm-mm.
time. Like
Nope.
most times they don't. I know I didn't have a coach.
Yeah.
I just went to swim team and I did
Hmm.
not lift. And so I love that you're teaching this at such a young age about one, like your life stressors are still stress and they
Hmm.
can influence what you do in the gym. And two, like training can be fun. And I think
Yeah.
especially as a high schooler, because they have all the stressors, a lot of them want to become professional athletes because they
Hmm.
have their whole life ahead of them. So they have
Hmm.
that mental stress on them.
Yep.
So I absolutely love how and even for adults such as myself, like you've
Hmm.
said, like my job is very physical. I'll have a really busy week and it actually fucking destroys me sometimes. Like my
Yeah.
body is messed up from picking up and putting away weights multiple times all day,
Hmm.
every day,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Do that for 8 hours. It's like, what? Like, are you feeling super cool right now? Like,
No,
probably not.
not feeling well. I've actually
Yeah.
started to some of my clients are actually helping me put weights away, which is awesome.
That's good.
But then yeah, yes, yes. Anyways, um, I absolutely love that, and I
Yeah.
think if anyone could get anything away from this episode so far, I hope it's that high schoolers should train like this. Like I like
Yeah.
how also you don't have a huge like annual plan. Like I think it's good to know kind of where you want to go, like have a general idea.
Hmm. Yeah.
But again, life happens.
Yeah. We want to win a state championship. That's what we want to do. Right?
Hmm.
And like we know that, but like if we are pedal to the metal the entire time, like over the course of the year I kind of started to the start of this football season, it's like are we like you guys still have to play football, you still have all these other things you have to do. So like let's balance this out a little bit, and like we're always going hard, don't get me wrong, right? Like we're always doing something challenging, but it's like what you choose to be the challenge that day um kind of has to be a little bit more aligned, with what we're trying to like accomplish and where their stress levels are at.
Right.
And that's where like understanding exercise and the physics of it, and like the way a exercise is changed, or excuse me, an exercise changes from a lengthened dominant exercise to a shortened position dominant exercise versus like this kind of tempo versus that kind of tempo versus a 5 rep max or a 1 rep max, like right, like how do you kind of weigh the systemic fatigue of like all those things, and
Right.
then how do you select the right exercise based on like where everything else is at in their life too. um, is just a thing I think that's lost on a lot of people, and should not be, because I think that's when you really start to fully understand like what this stuff's really all about, is like giving your best that day with what you got, and like always, no matter what, right? Like you're going to put 100% effort into what you're doing, but it doesn't mean it necessarily has to be a deficit deadlift with chains, where like you're forced to round your back and like explode your body as hard as you possibly can out of that like super gritty, fucked up position at the bottom, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's just some fucking reverse lunges and like some sprints and some jumps, right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes it is that really gross deadlift that like, hey, we got to do this right now, and so let's do it. Um,
Yes. I couldn't agree more. And I was gonna make a really good point and then I just started laughing at your gross deadlift.
yeah.
So I know, so I want to tie this together to how, because I want to talk about you being the second to last intern with
Hmm.
Louie.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess what were some of like connecting young Cooper to where you are now and
Hmm.
what you do now? what were some of your biggest takeaways from that was a nice pop.
Thank
What
you.
were some of your
Cracked my neck pretty good there.
what are some of your biggest takeaways from working with Louie?
Yeah, so I found my way to Westside Barbell when I was training to join the Marine Corps. And so what ended up happening with that was I got injured and then elected to separate from the military after that. Just because I wasn't really able to do the same job I wanted to do anymore. And so I was just kind of like, hey, like this isn't for me if I can't do what I signed up for. And so during that time of training up for that course I signed up to do, I trained with a guy at Westside Barbell named Joe Lasco. His handle is Special Strengths on Instagram. He's an incredible coach. And so I worked with him for about a year plus before I went into the Marine Corps and did all that stuff. And like we just developed a really, really good rapport. And he was working at Westside at the time, and I had gone out a few times to train at Westside with him. Um, and just really got a good understanding of like this is how training should look, and this is probably like how we need to start to learn this and focus on this. And after I got injured, which was no fault of the training plans, but just a fault of like you have X amount of gear, 100 pounds of gear on your back. You step in a pothole and like jack your shit up, like
Mm,
you're gonna be pretty rocked. And like just some of like the mental health issues I struggled with. Again, like I was not in a time like in my life where I was like super on top of my mental health. So like getting injured and being told, that I effectively couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And like, I got like extremely like, bent out of shape almost like overnight mental health wise. And so, that was a really tricky thing. But like after all that kind of settled, they were like, well, how about you come here and coach? Because we'd love to have you, and it'd be great for you to intern with us and help us work with the athletes. And so they kind of gave me a little bit of like a home after went through
yeah.
that shitty experience. And that was great, to just like have an environment where I could go again, like immerse myself in it, right? Like, because I knew that's what I needed to do if I wanted to be the best strength and conditioning coach possible. Was like I needed to be in an environment like what Westside has to offer. And, they've broken hundreds of world records. They have champions in jiu-jitsu. They have UFC champions. There's a few gold medal track athletes that have come out of there for the Olympics. They've trained a lot of tactical guys. So I'm like, this is the environment I need to be in. I need to be around these people, and I need to go as hard as possible. And like show up to Westside first day. They were doing what's called a Circa Max effort day. And Circa Max is basically like you load up 110% of like your one rep max squat in band tension on the bar. Like, so that like when you're at the top, you're at like
Mm,
110 or so, 120% of like what your squat was because you added all that band tension. And it's a way to like sort of progress your, like overload you so that come meet day for a powerlifting meet, you're ready to go. And so that was my first day there. I Mind you, I've been training to run and swim at a really, really high level, and I just got fucking stapled by the thing. And, like got a lot of shit for it, because this is an environment where people are, squatting 1,000 pounds. And here I am
right.
getting flattened. So like my first impression there wasn't great. Um, and
First
like,
day.
yeah, first day I got rocked and like got made fun of. And, there's a lot of shit talking that goes on at West Side. And it was just kind of like, you know what, like roll with it. And the environment was tough, and Louis was super hard on me, and he tried to many times like break me and make me quit. He wanted me to leave the gym.
Wow.
He sort of was like, he was like, who the fuck is this kid, and like, what's going on? Like why is he here? He's weak as shit, and doesn't really belong. And by the end of that, I kind of proved a little differently. As far as what I was. And Louis and I communicated a few times over the years after I left. And he eventually told me he really respected the fact that like no, even though I was weaker than piss, I, you
Weaker
know,
than piss.
like I was, he's like, you still just like showed up and fucking did it anyway. And I was like, yeah, I mean, what other option is there, man? Like, I'm here learning from the grandmaster of strength and conditioning and like the godfather of like powerlifting in the United States. And um, am I going to do anything other than say yes and do exactly what he tells me? Like, hell no. Like, this
Right,
is like,
right,
this is like probably one of the most important people who ever lived in strength and conditioning. I'm going to listen to everything that man has to say. And
absolutely.
I don't care what it is. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to max out and I'm going to put out as hard as I possibly could. And like, even though the numbers weren't necessarily impressive or anything, I felt like by the end of that, I earned his respect. Um, and yeah, it was a really good environment because he really taught me like through both, his teachings in the books he wrote, but also like in person, just like you kind of have to, you have the stimulus is the stimulus, but you also got to like get into the person's mind that you're training.
Mm,
If you can't get in their mind and understand what motivates them, if you can't get into their mind and understand like, like how they feel like they, need to go about things, and then like challenge them in new ways, like it just kind of doesn't matter. I always fall back to this is like, you got to know the physics and like how exercise works, but you also got to know when like we got to pick something that's like fucking hard today. And we
right.
gotta like understand that like I'm picking a variation that you suck at and scares you or that you've been injured on before, and you're gonna do it. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
do the thing and you're gonna do it well, and you're just gonna fucking like get over yourself a little bit here. Like, and that's kind of how I tend to coach is like he would call out exercises that day. They'd like go to breakfast in the morning, make the plan, and sort of like this is what we're doing, and I'm making you do this instead of you, who's gonna, do X exercise, like, because like this is what you need right now, and you don't need like, like whatever, like, you need to get better at deadlift. We know that, and like we know the meat and potatoes exercises that do that, but we're maxing out this disgusting band tension deadlift variation, today because like you were frankly being a wimpy little shithead last week, and we need to be on top of that, right? And like you need to like understand that like you cannot put you know your perceived suffering in front of, like in this melodrama in front of just getting good and getting stronger. And um I love to challenge my athletes, in that way because this is psychological.
Yeah.
Um, this is it's physiological for sure, and I personally know I need to be picking the right exercises and not being a dumbass with like training volumes and things. But like what I love about biology, it's like this is our left and right boundary, and that's what he really taught me is like these are the left and right boundaries of biology, and you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want in between here, and you probably need to make it like as aggressively close to that boundary as we can push it without actually tipping the athlete over into like injury territory or like negative effects on their training. And you need to like make them like put out really hard. And so I feel like I live in this space of like, hey, I know if I go too far that way, it's just a field of snakes that are going to kill me. If I go too far that way, I'm just going to fall off the map and die. And if I go too far that way, like I'm gonna be in like a snow field where I don't know which direction I'm facing. I'm just gonna freeze to death, right? Like so, like
Right.
I know, kind of like, hey, can't go that far or that way too much, but we can kind of exist in this sweet space of like the Goldilocks zone between those areas where like life's pretty cool and we can get good at stuff. And so that's what he really taught me was just like, look, like he told me, and I think he said this like many times, he's like, I learned everything I needed to learn about life in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And just like understanding like how intense you really can go as long as you sort of know where those left and right boundaries are. Like you can go really freaking hard if you know how to manipulate the exercises and things. And like, just that immersion of like, I'm going to be here every day around people that are hardcore, around people that want to train, and around people that are doing like frankly superhuman levels of physical feats. And it's like you can't help but like succeed at that point.
Right.
And so he really kind of like fostered that in me, and helped me believe in myself a lot more too. Because my last day there, um, he had made me do like some real fucked up shit. Because so I'm a pretty mobile dude. So like we did these like crazy variations that like none of his other guys could do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, he's like, well, what's like what's your DNA? Like, where are you from? Like, what are your nationalities? And I was like, I'm Korean, I'm, Irish town. He's like, we got like, some Asian hips. Like, come here. And, you like saw my mobility and like, it was like, finally, like someone to experiment on who like has like maybe some naturally gifted mobility or like a certain hip type that can tolerate these exercises. And so he made me do like these ultra deficit like Ukrainian deadlifts, which is like you basically take a gigantic kettlebell and you stand on two like 30-inch boxes, 1 foot on each, and like you just go as deep as you possibly can and like deadlift out of that like super deep crazy position. He also had me do like we put two clips on the inside of the plates and shoved my
Okay.
feet so that like you could get your feet wider, right? Because if you put your plates all the way against the collar, they stop here, but you put two
Uh,
clips on the inside and they kind of go out wider. And so I had to shove my feet all the way out there and sumo deadlift in an ultra wide stance, like
like a
you know,
split
yep. And
almost.
and there were tons of sets where he's like, you're gonna do 5 reps, and then I get under the bar, do 2 reps. He's like, you're going to 15. I was like, cool, 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 cool. And then like things like, hey, like I'm gonna put two plates on this safety bar. You're gonna do 100 good mornings without letting the bar go off your back.
Two
And I was,
plates?
yeah. And I was like,
Wow.
all right, like whatever, like like I was like, I'm not getting out until we reach 100, so let's fucking do this. um and then I did it, and like like at a certain point I'm like barely leaning forward and like getting it, and he's still counting the reps. He's like just wanting to make sure that like I'm not gonna quit.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm like, what else you got, dude? That was kind of like like my mentality there was like, I was like, there is literally nothing you can make me do that like is going to make me quit and leave this gym.
I mean,
Like
I think
I,
you earned his respect when, yeah, when he found out you had the mobile hips.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah. He
that
was,
was the moment.
he was like, ooh, yeah, I can do some weird stuff with you
I
that
was
that these
wrong
other
about
guys can't
you.
do. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, he was hard on me while we were there, and but at the end I threw on like a set of briefs, which is like equipped powerlifting stuff, and like I threw that on, and like I squatted 500 pounds, which was like the heaviest I'd ever squatted. And he was like, whoa, that's fucking like you did not have that in you when you came, and that's pretty sweet.
That's
um
dope.
and
Yeah.
he drove me to the airport that day, my last day, and he was like, you did it, you did do a good job while you were here, and just like go share it with the world, man. And it was great, and I was very very grateful of everything he did for me. And still continues to do even after he died. That
Yeah.
that 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 dude's legacy lives on, because that's a man that kind of operated in a way that's not quite how things operate in today's day and age. He'd give you like the shirt off his back, and I really mean that. Like like the way that gym works, like it's free. Anyone can come at any time, and they can go work out there, and it's whatever. But like if you're there, like you kind of gotta like do what he's telling you to do. And,
Right.
and and he made the gym that way so that like there's no financial, like you can leave whenever, because the
Mm-hmm.
financial commitment is one that's sort of like like this is a service, and like he hated that element of it. And he's like, I know what you need to do, and I don't want to have to like pander to you in a certain way about it.
Right.
And like I don't like necessarily agree with that, but he was like that kind of dude. He's like, but you can stay here, you can sleep here, you can like like do whatever, and like I'll help you get better at this stuff. um he's like, you just gotta like you know show up, That's literally all it ever was show up and
Yeah.
I will help you. I will teach you things. And he really never asked a dime from people, and just made really good equipment, and like wrote a lot of really good books, which is where he made his money. Um,
I was gonna
but like
say it. I think sorry to interrupt, but I
you're
think
good.
that you are fulfilling, what he said of like sharing what you learned. Because
Hmm.
for me, at least, I can speak for myself. And when we first started working together, I had told you that I
Hmm.
had never felt so unathletic in my life. I was
Hmm.
at a
I
very
remember
low
that.
point. Um, I was in this vicious cycle of low back pain,
Hmm.
and I was pretty hopeless. And so, then we started working together, and I can deadlift, I can
Hmm.
squat, I can run,
Yep.
all these things that I was terrified to do and was again stuck in this vicious cycle. And it's because you took that bit that you learned, and now you like taught me all this stuff, and it
Hmm.
sparked my interest, and now I'm learning it and reading his books, and I'm sharing, practicing with my clients to
Yeah.
not all that fucked up shit, but you know what I mean, like,
Yeah.
but to an
You got
extent,
to
like
meet them where
I'm
they're at.
yes, and it's piqued my interest that I'm learning about his system now because of you, and like I'm able to do stuff because of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, just wanted to put that out there that
No, that's great.
yeah, it was all worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people like, you can intellectualize anything mentally, right? And like think things in your brain, and you can have all sorts of feelings in your heart, and emotions surrounding that. But like, it really comes down to like what you believe in your gut, and
Hmm.
like your feelings and your mind will tell you like whether that's a true belief or not, like, or whether that's a good belief or not, like what, um, like that they will dictate like essentially that suffering component that we kind of talked about earlier, right? Like you will suffer, built around your belief systems about yourself, and about like what you can or can't do. And like, I think kind of breaking people's belief systems about themselves and reshaping them into something that actually serves the goal and what
Yeah.
they're trying to get better at, and overcoming fear,
Hmm.
and things of that nature, is like that's where we should spend more time as coaches, I think.
I agree.
And that's, where, to your point, like, when we started, you're like, I don't feel athletic, and I'm like, like feeling afraid of like, lifting heavy weight. And now, right, like you're crushing lifetime PRs, you're, like starting to get to the point where like, you're approaching 1.5 to 2 times body weight on things, like, stuff zooming. And that was
It
like,
is.
that's completely different athlete than when we started. And
Yeah,
so, that's a testament to you as well, because you kind of have to have an open mind.
absolutely.
And that's, like you can always go up to the ledge, but I'm like, I can't jump for you.
A
So,
thousand percent. Yep.
I can, but I can help you build that belief that you can. Um,
Yeah,
and so, yeah, that's kind of where the, can talk X's and O's of training all day long, but that's, if you can't do that, the doesn't matter. Not going to
I
carry over.
I definitely agree, and I want to like follow all of this up with saying, I really like how you do have to get into the mind of the
Hmm.
person. You can't lead. You can like do the best programming in the world, and it won't be effective if they don't have that
Hmm.
motivation to do it.
Yep.
And so I'm super excited for everyone to just hear about your experience with Louie. I think
Yeah.
that's just such a unique experience. But like kind of to tie this all together, because I have
Hmm.
5 minutes left.
Totally.
I could talk to you like Cooper and I could talk all day. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Um, so in a 1 minute, like a short summary,
Hmm.
what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Mm. Let me marinate on that for a second.
Yeah, go ahead and marinate. Let them cook.
I would say, based on the things I was being told as a kid, and the environment I grew up in, and like the stresses and difficulties that kind of came along with some of those things, like just double down on yourself and trust that like you are right in your mind, right? Like, and your beliefs, even though they may be like counter to what's traditional, like are still nevertheless valid, and like you should not try and suppress any of that. You should double down on yourself, and just like I think it's hard to kind of like when you're a kid understand like what about yourself is like legit or real or like any of that. But yeah, it's just like like be more curious and be more like on top of your pursuit of understanding yourself.
I love
um
that.
that'd be what it is. Because like yeah, I've made mistakes and things of that nature, but like I would have saved myself a lot of suffering if I had just sort of like you know was a little bit more bold in my belief in myself and
Yeah,
my validity as like a human. Um, so yeah, that's what I would tell. Just like chill the fuck out and understand that like you're not doing anything wrong. You're good.
I love that. I think
So
it's
yeah,
easy for us to have a self-doubt, but at the end of the day, no one's going to believe in yourself if you don't. If you don't give yourself that permission to go on the path that's like the less
yeah,
traveled path, for example.
yeah.
So
Of
I just want to say I really appreciate you being here, Cooper.
course.
I
Thank you for
know
having me.
we went through a lot of technical
We
difficulties.
did, but we sure as shit solved it, didn't we?
We sure as shit did. 4 times later, we finally figured
Yep.
it out.
Yep.
Um, so could you tell us all where we can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Delta 5 Performance, all lowercase. Just spell all those words out, and I'll be there. I'm on TikTok, same handle, I believe. And yeah, those are kind of the two main places I post on social media. This summer, I'll be kind of working a little more intensely with the high school kids that I work with. So if that's of interest to you, and you're interested in following along kind of my own training as I pursue like 60-inch box jump, 600-pound deadlift. Looking to get, first time hitting 315 on bench. Like, if you're interested in any of that stuff too, that's all kind of available there. But yeah, the focus this summer is really going to be on the kids,
I
and
love
what we're
that.
doing to work towards, winning a state championship.
Let's
Um,
go.
so we're, all systems go on that, and it's time to make these kids evolve in a way they've not had to. So.
Yeah, turn them into little monsters.
That's right. That's right. I'm trying. We need to get some savage animals out there this year.
Yeah.
Um,
All
so yeah,
right.
cool.
Well, thanks, Cooper, and
You
we'll
got it.
chat later.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course.